Welcome back to another edition of 10 Count for the Undisputed Champion Network. I'm Dave Smith along with Doug Fischer and Michael Baca. You know, the first round knockout, impressive win for Danny Jacobs over Peter Quillin. And Doug Fischer, are we forgetting about Danny Jacobs in this mix here? We talk about all the middleweight fights, Canelo and Triple G and Andre Ward. We're not bringing his name up coming off a good win.
He was sort of the forgotten man in the 160-pound division. And I think it's two reasons. One, he's part of the premier boxing champions, Al Haymon's PBC outfit, which means he generally just fights guys who are managed by or advised by Al Haymon. So it's been hard to think about him future matchups with between Jacobs and, say, a Canelo Alvarez or a Gennady Golovkin or an Andy Lee or anybody else who's not involved with the PBC. Although I think Andy Lee is somewhat involved with the PBC because he's promoted by Lou DiBella, who has a very strong relationship with Al Haymon. But I don't think he's necessarily a Haymon fighter. But it's limited how we view Danny Jacobs. And I think the other reason is we just forgot how talented he was. I mean, he had that battle with cancer, so he was out of the ring for a year and a half. And then it's been sort of a gradual comeback for him where he was fighting journeymen that he was supposed to beat, and then gatekeepers, and then fringe contenders. And he's been beating these guys, and his last fight was a second-round stoppage of Sergio Mora, going into the Peter Quillin fight. But it wasn't a real stoppage of Sergio Mora. They traded knockdowns in the first round, and then Mora twisted his ankle in the second round, and the fight ended like that. So it's not like he actually knocked out Sergio Mora. Had he done that, had he really knocked out Mora, who has a pretty good chin, not a guy that gets knocked out or blown out, I think a lot of people would have favored him going into the match with Peter Quillin. But because we've never really seen him knock out a top 10 middleweight, and as flawed as Peter Quillin is, he was unbeaten, and he is the kind of guy who either scores a lot of knockdowns against fellow top 10 contenders, or he actually knocks guys out. I think the thinking was that Quillin was going to get outboxed early, but then eventually just impose that brute physical strength and that size. Quillin's the kind of guy who weighs in at 160 and then fights at 180, and then figuring, he's just going to wear him down and stop him late because Jacobs hasn't shown a Jake LaMotta-esque chin in the past. His one loss was a knockout to Dmitry Pirog like 5 years ago. But we forgot that this guy had an excellent amateur background. He's got great technique. He's a good athlete. He's actually a pretty big middleweight. And he's got speed and power. And what we saw in that first round against Quillin is something we've never seen from him before, Michael, and that's a killer instinct.
One interesting thing I thought about that fight were the mistakes of Quillin.
And he's always been a guy to make a lot of mistakes, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. Jacobs pawed out a little left hook, and Quillin's reaction was to blink, and he crossed his arms at the same time. And that's when Jacobs came around with the right hand, and Quillin's eyes were closed when it happened. So obviously he didn't know it was coming. And that's what initially buzzed him. Once that happened, he tried to fight his way out of it. He didn't manage himself to hug onto Jacobs and recover.
Taking a knee or just holding for dear life would have served him well. But I don't even think he fought back instinctively. To me, he didn't fight back in a way that would have prevented a referee from stopping the fight. I mean, it was a bit controversial because it was kind of quick, but his legs weren't under him, and he didn't seem to have the kind of survival instincts you would expect from somebody with more than 30 professional fights, somebody who had held a major title.
Yes, absolutely. And I have no arguments with Doc's decision, the referee that night. Another thing is, about Jacobs is, you're right, he has been lost in all this mix about Golovkin. He holds the JV WBA title.
That's another thing. He doesn't really hold. I mean, he has the WBA title, but it's Golovkin who's really recognized as the WBA champ, the super champ. What JV is a great way to describe it. Jacobs has the regular version of the WBA's world.
Whatever
heavyweight
whatever
title.
that means.
That doesn't help your.
We
That
know
doesn't
him
really
as
raise
boxing-
your stature.
We
either.
know Danny Jacobs as boxing fans. We know what he can do. How marketable and how sellable is he, though, in the pay-per-view market right now? If you're talking
Not
about
pay-per-view. You know what? He's
well,
not
the Triple G
pay-per-view.
Canelo winner, is he marketable
Yes.
enough for
Yes,
that?
Yes, he
absolutely,
is.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, is that a pay-
He's American. He's got a great story with beating cancer. He's a great guy. He's an excellent interview.
Yep.
He's genuinely likable. So he just comes over really well. I think guys like that, they can help promote a fight. And let's just say Triple G Canelo can't be worked out for 2016. Danny Jacobs is a great substitute for
Yes.
Triple G, who is proven to be an attraction in New York City. He sold out Madison Square Garden against David Lemieux in October of 2015. Now, imagine him in with a native New Yorker, a Brooklyn native who is as well-spoken and likable as Danny Jacobs, and coming off such a sensational victory as Jacobs is coming off. I mean, that definitely, just as an attraction, it sells out Madison Square Garden.
Oh, yeah.
As for pay-per-view, I don't know how much it sells, but I would guess it does more than 150,000 that Triple G Lemieux got.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Well, we hope so.
You agree?
We hope so, yeah.
And that's it for another edition of the 10 Count. Dave Smith again for Doug Fischer, Michael Baca on the Undisputed Champion Network. We'll talk to you next time.